The day Rafa's father-in-law stood up at a family dinner and called her a useless barren witch, she didn't cry. She just looked at her husband, who said nothing, and quietly picked up her plate as her world collapsed silently around her. But what no one knew was that Rafa was keeping a secret that would silence an entire house. For 6 long years, Rafa gave everything to her marriage. She stood by Zeno when his business almost collapsed, cooking meals with little money, praying for him, and never once complaining. She turned their small house into a warm home, filled with love, even if it was just the two of them. But no matter how much she did, it was never enough for Babamuko, Zeno's father. To him, she had one job, to give the family a child, and because she hadn't, he treated her like she was nothing. At every family gathering, weddings, birthdays, even small dinners, Babamuko would make a point to place one chair at the table that no one was allowed to sit on. "This is for the grandchild we're still waiting for," he'd say loudly, his eyes always landing on Rafa with judgment. Some would laugh, others would look away awkwardly. But Rafa, she would just sit quietly, forcing a smile, swallowing the pain in her chest like a bitter pill. She never told anyone how much it hurt, not even Zeno, because every time she tried to speak about it, he would say, "Just ignore him, he's old," or "He doesn't mean it like that." But Rafa knew he meant every word, and Zeno's silence felt like another knife in her back. Sometimes, after the events, she would lock herself in the bathroom and cry quietly so no one would hear. Then she would wipe her face and come out like nothing happened, because that's what strong women are expected to do. But deep down, Rafa was tired. Tired of pretending, tired of being blamed, tired of sitting across from that empty chair, a chair that didn't just remind them of a missing child, but reminded her of how invisible she had become in the family she tried so hard to belong to. No one saw her sacrifices. No one saw her heart. All they saw was a womb they believed had failed. But what none of them knew, not even Zeno, was that Rafa had already started searching for the truth. And when she found it, it would be loud enough to flip every chair in that house, even the empty one. One quiet night, Rafa was walking past the living room to get a glass of water when she heard Zeno's voice. He was on the phone, speaking softly, almost like he didn't want anyone to hear. She wasn't trying to listen, but one sentence stopped her feet. "Maybe she really is cursed," he said. Her heart dropped. Her body froze. For a second, she thought she had imagined it. But no, those words were real. Her own husband was talking about her like that. She stood there, just a few steps away, holding her breath, not making a sound. His voice continued, low and tired. "I don't know what else to think, Mama. It's been 6 years." Then silence. Rafa quickly turned around and walked back to the bedroom, her legs weak, her heart beating painfully in her chest. When Zeno came to bed a few minutes later, she pretended to be asleep. She didn't want him to see the tears in her eyes. Lying there in the dark, Rafa stared at the ceiling, unable to close her eyes. The man she had defended so many times, the man she had prayed with, cried with, and believed in, now thought she was cursed. And what hurt more than his words? His silence. All those times his father insulted her, called her barren, called her useless. Zeno never said anything. She told herself he was trying to avoid family drama. She told herself he loved her in his own quiet way. But now, she wasn't so sure. Beside her, Zeno was fast asleep, breathing peacefully, as if nothing had happened. Rafa turned to look at him. The man she once trusted more than anyone now felt like a stranger. She wanted to shake him, ask him why, ask him how he could let her carry all the blame, all the shame, while he stayed silent. But she didn't. She just watched him and realized something important. His silence wasn't just weakness, it was betrayal. That night, Rafa didn't sleep. Her body was still, but her mind was racing. So many memories, so many sacrifices, and yet, in one moment, one careless sentence, it all shattered. And still, she said nothing, because that's what she had always done. Stayed quiet, held everything inside. But deep inside her, something had changed. She felt it. The pain didn't just break her. It woke something up, something strong, something dangerous. And soon, the truth would no longer stay silent. Rafa couldn't hold the pain anymore. After that night, after hearing her husband's cruel words, something inside her broke. For years, she had carried the shame of not having a child. She had let people call her names, look at her with pity, treat her like she was less of a woman. But now, even Zeno, the man she loved, believed she was cursed. She needed answers, not from doctors, not from people who only saw her womb, but from someone who knew her heart. So one morning, without telling anyone, Rafa packed a small bag and travelled to the village. It had been years since she visited. The road was quiet, the trees familiar, and with every step, her heart beat faster. She was going to see Aunt Neca, her late mother's only sister, a woman people whispered about. Some called her a healer, others called her strange. But Rafa remembered her as kind, as someone who always saw more than what the eyes could see. When she arrived, Aunt Neca was sitting outside her small house, peeling oranges, her face lit up with a warm smile. "Ah, my daughter," she said softly. "Your mother has been whispering to me. I knew you would come." Rafa tried to smile, but her lips trembled. The tears came quickly. She sat beside Aunt Neca and told her everything. The insults, the silence, the pain, the emptiness, and finally, the words that crushed her spirit. Maybe she really is cursed. Aunt Neca listened without interrupting. She placed a hand gently on Rafa's shoulder and looked into her eyes. Then she said something that made Rafa sit up. "My child, sometimes it's not the soil that's dry. It's the seed that's been poisoned." Rafa blinked. "What do you mean, Mama?" Aunt Neca looked out at the trees, her voice calm but deep. "You've blamed yourself for too long, but maybe the problem isn't in you. Maybe the one pointing fingers is hiding the truth. You've given love, care, and loyalty, but has anyone given you the same in return? Before you carry a burden, make sure it belongs to you." That evening, Aunt Neca gave Rafa some herbs, not magic, just natural things to calm her mind and body. "These won't fix what's broken," she said, "but they'll help you think clearly. And my dear, thinking clearly is the first step to truth." Rafa slept in the small room, her heart heavy but also strangely at peace. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen. She wasn't a curse, she wasn't a failure. She was a woman searching for answers, and she had just found the courage to stop blaming herself. The seed of truth had been planted, and soon it would grow. After coming back from Aunt Neca's place, Rafa felt a little stronger. She had cried enough. Now it was time to find out the truth. She had carried shame on her back for too long, and something inside her said, what if the problem was never her? So, one evening, while sitting beside Zeno, she gently said, "Let's both go for a fertility test, just to be sure. Maybe it's something small we can fix together." At first, Zeno didn't like the idea. He frowned and said, "Why now? People will talk." But Rafa smiled and spoke calmly. "We don't have to tell anyone, not even your father. I just want us to be sure. For us, not them." After a long pause, he finally agreed, but only if she promised to keep it a secret. She nodded. Inside, her heart was racing, but her face stayed calm. A few days later, they both went to the clinic. The doctor was kind and professional, asking questions, taking samples, and assuring them that many couples face similar challenges. Zeno stayed quiet most of the time. Rafa held his hand tightly, acting like everything was normal. But inside, she was praying, not for a child, but for the truth. When the test results came, Rafa returned to the clinic alone. She told Zeno she would collect both reports and bring them home. The doctor greeted her, gave her a warm smile, and handed her the papers. "You're perfectly fine, Rafa," he said. "There's no medical reason stopping you from conceiving." Her hands shook slightly. Relief flooded her body, but it didn't last long. Then the doctor paused. He looked at Zeno's report, held it for a moment, then looked at her again. "Do you want to see your husband's results too?" he asked gently. Rafa nodded slowly. He handed it to her, and as her eyes moved down the page, she felt the ground beneath her shake. Zeno's results were clear. He was the one who couldn't father a child, not her. All these years of pain, of insults, of feeling like something was wrong with her. It wasn't her body that failed, it was his. She sat there frozen, staring at the paper. Her chest felt heavy. Her fingers turned cold, not because of the result, but because of the silence. The years of silence. The blame she had carried all alone. The doctor said nothing more. Rafa stood up, folded the reports, and thanked him. She walked out of the clinic quietly, her legs numb, her mind spinning. On the way home, she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just kept hearing Aunt Neca's words in her head. Sometimes it's not the soil that's dry. It's the seed that's been poisoned. Now Rafa knew the truth, but what would she do with it? Rafa walked slowly down the street, her mind full of thoughts. The test results were still in her bag, but they felt heavier than anything she had ever carried. She kept asking herself, why did he let me suffer? Why did he stay silent while I was being blamed? Her feet moved on their own as her heart stayed numb, but just as she passed a small pharmacy, she saw something that made her stop. A young girl was sitting on the steps, holding her face in her hands, crying. People passed by without noticing, but Rafa couldn't ignore her. She walked over and gently touched her shoulder. "Are you okay, my dear?" she asked softly. The girl looked up, her eyes red and puffy. She was maybe 18 or 19, with a small round face and trembling hands. "I don't know what to do," the girl whispered. I just found out I'm pregnant." Rafa's heart softened. She sat beside her, offering a bottle of water from her bag. The girl took it and thanked her. "What's your name?" Rafa asked. "Laura," she said, wiping her tears. "I've been dating a man. He said he loved me, said he'd leave his wife soon. But now I don't even know if he'll pick up my calls. I'm scared. My parents will throw me out if they find out." Rafa felt a sharp pain in her chest. She had come from hearing that her own husband couldn't have children, and now she was sitting next to a young girl who was carrying one for someone else's husband. Still, she stayed calm, offering comfort. "You're not alone," Rafa said. "Some things feel big now, but they don't have to end your life." Laura nodded slowly, then said, "You're kind. You remind me of someone. Let me show you. This is him." She opened her phone and pulled up a picture. "This is the man I told you about." Rafa leaned in, expecting to see a stranger's face. But when the photo appeared, her entire body went cold. It was Zeno, her Zeno, standing beside Laura, smiling in the picture, his hand on her waist, like he owned her. Rafa blinked hard, trying to breathe. She couldn't speak for a moment. She just stared at the photo, heart pounding so loudly she could hear it in her ears. Her mouth was dry, her body stiff. It was like everything around her stopped moving. She looked at Laura, who still didn't know, still didn't realize the truth. And Rafa, she couldn't tell her. Not yet. She just nodded slowly, stood up and said, "Thank you for showing me. You're going to be okay." Then she walked away, holding in the scream that was rising in her throat. The test results weren't the only truth she had found that day. Now she knew the whole picture, and it was uglier than she ever imagined. Rafa didn't sleep that night. Her mind was spinning with everything she had just discovered. First, the test results showed she was healthy, and it was Zeno who couldn't father a child. Then, she met Laura, a scared, pregnant young girl who unknowingly revealed that Zeno was cheating on her. Rafa wanted to scream, cry, throw something, but she didn't. Instead, she sat quietly at her small table with a pen and paper in front of her, and then she began to write. But the letter wasn't for Zeno. It was for the man who had insulted her the most. Babamuko, the man who had stood in front of family and guests and called her a witch, a barren woman, and a curse to their bloodline. He had made her feel like dirt, like her womanhood didn't matter without a child. But now, Rafa had the truth, and this time, she wouldn't keep it to herself. She wrote every word with care, not with anger, but with calm strength. In the letter, she didn't shout or blame. She simply told him, "You have hurt me deeply, with your words and your looks. You made me believe I was the problem, but I stayed silent, not because I was weak, but because I believed silence would protect this family. I see now that silence only protects lies." She then gently placed the hospital test results in the envelope, both hers and Zeno's, clear proof that she could have children, and Zeno could not. She also printed the picture Laura had shown her, the one of Zeno smiling beside her like a proud lover. She folded everything neatly and added one last line at the bottom of the letter. "Before you ever call me cursed again, please open this envelope. I have been silent, but silence is not weakness. It's the space where truth takes shape." The next day, she walked to Babamuko's compound, where everyone was getting ready for his 70th birthday party. She handed the sealed envelope to a housemaid and simply said, "Please give this to him directly and tell him not to open it now. He'll know when the time is right." Then she turned and walked away. Her heart was beating fast, but not with fear, with power. For the first time, Rafa wasn't hiding, wasn't begging to be seen, wasn't waiting for love from people who didn't value her. She wasn't going to fight with screams or tears. She was going to fight with truth. and let it speak louder than anything they ever said about her. The letter was now in Babamuko's house. The truth was on its way. The big day finally came. Babamuko's 70th birthday. The compound was full of people. Family members, neighbors, friends, and even distant relatives had gathered to celebrate the man they all respected. There was music, dancing, and plenty of food. Everyone was dressed in their best clothes, and smiles were everywhere. At the center of it all sat Babamuko, wearing a rich agbada, looking proud and powerful. Right beside him sat Zeno, with people praising him for being such a loyal son and a strong husband, even without children. Rafa hadn't shown up yet, and many thought she wouldn't come at all. Some whispered, "After all the things Baba said about her, she has no shame." Others just ignored her completely. But then, as people were settling down for speeches, the gates opened slowly, heads turned, whispers started. Rafa had arrived. She walked in calmly, dressed in simple clothes. But what caught everyone's attention wasn't just her. It was the young girl walking beside her, Laura. And in Rafa's hand was a brown envelope. She didn't rush. She didn't smile too big. She just walked through the crowd like she had nothing to prove. All eyes followed her as she made her way to the front. When Babamuko saw her, his smile faded. He leaned forward and asked loudly, "Why is she here?" Rafa stood still, looked him straight in the eye, and said softly, "Because you all deserve the truth." The place went quiet. Even the music had stopped. Zeno looked confused, shifting in his seat. Rafa turned to the crowd and spoke, her voice steady but not angry. "For years I have been blamed. I have been insulted. I was called barren, cursed, useless. But today I bring proof." She held up the envelope, and the air got heavy. "In this envelope is a test result that shows I am healthy. I can have children. The problem was never me." People gasped softly. Zeno stood up quickly, his face full of panic. But Rafa raised her hand calmly. "Let me finish." She then placed the envelope on the table in front of Babamuko. "Inside is also another truth, a DNA test. Not just for me, not just for Zeno, but for someone else." She turned and gently placed her hand on Laura's shoulder. "This is Laura. She is pregnant. She thought Zeno was the father, but he is not." Everyone froze. Rafa looked at Babamuko again. "The DNA test says the baby she's carrying belongs to you." The entire room fell into complete silence. You could hear a spoon drop. Babamuko's hand began to shake. Zeno sat down slowly, like the strength had left his legs. Rafa didn't cry. She didn't shout. She simply stepped back and said, "Truth doesn't need noise. It only needs light." And in that moment, everything changed. Rafa stood quietly in front of the whole family, with all eyes fixed on her. She gently placed the brown envelope on the table in front of Babamuko. Her hands didn't shake. Her eyes didn't blink. Everyone was waiting, some in shock, some in fear, and others with curiosity. Babamuko slowly reached for the envelope, his fingers trembling just a little. He opened it, pulled out the papers, and started reading. At first, his eyes narrowed, like he didn't understand. Then he read the same lines again, and again. His face changed. His lips opened, but no words came out. The first paper confirmed what Rafa had already said. She was completely healthy. Her womb was not the problem. In fact, there was no medical reason stopping her from getting pregnant. All this time, they had blamed her for something she didn't even do. Then came the second report. It was Zeno's. Everyone leaned in closer, sensing something serious. The room was quiet. Even the children had stopped playing. The report clearly stated that Zeno was infertile. He could not father a child. Gasps filled the air. Some people covered their mouths. Others looked at Zeno, who sat frozen in his chair, sweating, his head down. His secret was out. But it wasn't over. Babamuko turned to the next page. Another DNA test. His hands were shaking now. He tried to read it quickly, but the words refused to be ignored. The paternity test for Laura's unborn baby was there, and the name printed under biological father was not Zeno. It was Babamuko. The room exploded, not with noise, but with disbelief. You could feel the shock like thunder. Some people gasped loudly. Others just stared at the old man. A cup dropped and rolled on the floor. Babamuko's eyes grew wide, his face pale. He tried to speak, but all that came out was a choking sound. He reached for his glass of wine, took a sip, and then coughed so hard that people rushed to his side. He waved them off, embarrassed, humiliated. Zeno sat still, as if the floor had swallowed his strength. His father, the same man who called Rafa a witch, was the father of Laura's baby, the same Laura Zeno had secretly been seeing behind Rafa's back. Rafa didn't say another word. She didn't have to. The truth had done the speaking. The same people who once judged her were now too ashamed to meet her eyes. She looked at Babamuko one last time, not with anger, but with something stronger, pity. Then she turned around, took Laura's hand, and walked out of the room as quietly as she had entered. But the silence they left behind was the loudest thing that house had ever heard. After that unforgettable day, nothing was ever the same again. The truth had broken the family into pieces, and there was no way to fix it. Zeno tried to talk to Rafa the next morning. He followed her to the gate, calling her name, begging for just 1 minute. His voice was low, full of regret, but Rafa didn't stop. She didn't turn around. She simply took off her wedding ring, placed it gently on the bench near the front door, and walked away. That ring said everything she didn't need to say out loud. Zeno stood there, holding the ring in his hand, completely helpless. The same man who let his wife suffer in silence. The same man who watched her get insulted again and again, now wanted to say sorry, but it was too late. Sorry could not erase 6 years of pain, or all the nights Rafa cried alone, or the shame she carried for something that was never her fault. Months passed, and the once lively house that was always full of laughter and visitors became quiet. The big compound where family members gathered for celebrations now sat empty. The chairs were stacked, the windows stayed shut. Even the smell of fresh cooking disappeared. No one wanted to visit the house of secrets anymore. Babamuko, who used to walk around the village with pride, now stayed indoors. He stopped going to meetings. He stopped greeting neighbors. When people passed by, they whispered behind his back, shaking their heads in disappointment. The shame was too much. His voice, once loud and full of command, was now barely heard. He had lost the respect he once demanded from everyone. Zeno spent his days alone. He stopped smiling. He stopped working. The silence in the house was loud. Every corner reminded him of Rafa, her laughter in the kitchen, her soft voice in the evenings, the way she used to wait for him at the door with hope in her eyes. Now, all of that was gone, and he knew it was because he didn't protect her. He didn't believe in her, and he didn't stand by her when it mattered most. As for Rafa, no one knew exactly where she went. Some said she moved to a new town. Others said she started working with women who went through similar pain. But one thing was clear: she was free. Free from the lies, the blame, and the weight of a house that never truly welcomed her. She didn't leave with anger. She left with peace. And for the first time in years, she was living, not just surviving. The house they once called home was still standing, but without Rafa, it was just walls and a roof. The warmth was gone, the light was gone, and the silence, it stayed. In a quiet town far from the whispers and wounds of her past, Rafa found something she never had before: peace. She didn't return to the life she once begged to be part of. Instead, she built something new from the ashes they left her in. A small, humble centre sat under a wide tree, with open doors and open hearts. It wasn't fancy, but it was full of life. Women came there, not because they were broken, but because the world had tried to break them, and Rafa knew exactly how that felt. Some of them had been thrown out by their families for not having children. Others had been called witches by in-laws or neighbours. They came with bruised hearts, tear-stained eyes, and questions like, "Am I enough?" And every time, Rafa welcomed them with a calm smile and a voice that didn't just speak, it healed. People asked her how she did it, how she got up after everything, how she walked out of that house, left her ring, and never looked back. And when they asked, Rafa didn't speak with anger. She didn't speak with sadness. She spoke with strength, the kind that grows in silence. After pain has done its damage, they called me cursed, she often said, her voice steady. But the only curse I carried was loving people who never saw my worth. Those words sat deep in the hearts of the women around her, because they all knew what it meant to shrink yourself, to keep quiet, to cry when no one was watching. But Rafa had done what most were too afraid to do. She chose herself. She wasn't bitter. She wasn't broken. She was chosen to be the light in someone else's darkness. chosen to remind women that they don't have to carry shame for things they didn't cause, and most of all, chosen to love fully, deeply, and truly, not just others, but herself too. Sometimes, she'd sit with a small child in her arms, one left behind by a mother too hurt to stay, and she'd whisper, "You're loved, you're safe, you're enough." And in those moments, it didn't matter that the child wasn't born from her. What mattered was that they were born into her love. "Now," she said once during a small interview, "I love myself enough for all the children I'll raise, even if they aren't mine." That was the real victory. Not revenge, not even justice, but peace, purpose, and a kind of joy that no one could take from her ever again. How many women have been called less just for not bearing a child? Share this story to remind the world. A woman's worth is never tied to her womb. It's tied to her strength. Share this. Save a sister.